program December 1st. We will be starting with a small group of people, and hopefully by spring, when it becomes kitten season, we'll have a whole group of people that want to foster all the kittens that come in.
Because you know there will be some. But that gives us the opportunity to talk about how the Humane Society deals medically with the animals that are brought to it. And you do deal with their medical issues if they have problems, number one, but also with ensuring that somebody who comes in to adopt a pet is going to get not only a healthy pet, but one that has been, let's say, it's been rearranged a little bit. Can I put it that way?
Absolutely.
The Indiana County Republican Committee is proud to be a presenting sponsor of today's debate, and we thank Renda Broadcasting for hosting it, as we have always supported getting factual information out to our community. Our committee would like to thank each of you for listening in, as it is very important for votes to be made with knowledge and confidence. Let's work together and keep Indiana, Pennsylvania, and America great by voting all Republican on November 3rd.
Hi, I'm Denny Simsek, candidate for the House of Representatives.
And I'm Tony DeLoreto, candidate for state senator.
We encourage everyone to make their voices heard through their vote.
We favor investments in education and limiting the taxpayers' burden from the inequities of charter and cyber schools. I'm Tony DeLoreto.
I'm Denny Simsek.
And we both ask for
your vote on November 3rd.
Marino, your moderator, joined in the studio this morning by Tony DeLoreto, Democratic candidate for the State Senate from the 41st District, Joe Pittman, candidate for the Republican Party in the 41st District as well. And let's greet them both. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning, Todd. Good morning, Todd.
Good to have you both with us here today. We'll ask you to pick those microphones up so that we can eliminate some of our background noise. We'll also ask you, if you can, to please avoid tapping on your table because that sometimes comes through in the microphone. We want everything to be perfectly clear. Want to invite our listeners to join us as well this morning on our video channel, our video feed. You can go to our Facebook page and pick that up very, very easily. Here's the format. Our candidates will each be given 2 minutes for an opening statement this morning, and they'll also be given 2 minutes for a closing statement. Questions have been submitted. Some gathered here at the radio station, some from our listeners, and we'll mix them up. And each candidate will have first shot at one question, and then there will be a chance for a 60-second rebuttal, followed by a rebuttal to the rebuttal, if you will, of 60 seconds as well. And we will move through as quickly as we can so that we can get as many of these statements as we can as well. And so that having been said, we held a random drawing. And Mr. Pittman, you have been the one who has been chosen to give your opening statement first. And so, Joe Pittman, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Todd, and good morning. I very much appreciate the venue that you and your team here at Renda have set up for us today. In this new dynamic of the pandemic, it's very difficult for us to communicate with the voters directly, and this kind of venue has become increasingly important, as was the venue we had last week. I want to thank Mr. DeLoreto also for stepping forward to be a candidate for public office. Anybody who steps across the line to serve as a candidate deserves our respect, and I particularly appreciate the investment that he and his family have made in the Indiana County community for nearly 3 decades. My wife Jean and I are very proud to live here in Indiana Borough, to be raising our 4 children. She and I are both lifelong residents of this area. I grew up in Hillsdale in northern Indiana County. I graduated from the Purchase Line School District. I actually served on the school board at Purchase Line back in the 1990s at the age of 18. My wife Gina graduated from Shannock Valley High School in Rural Valley, and this is home to us. And my overall objective is to try and help our communities succeed and grow and prosper. And in the 16 months since I've been in office, I do think, despite the challenges of the pandemic, that we have made progress. Shortly, we'll be opening and dedicating the Alice Paul House, the domestic violence shelter. We'll be dedicating the Conservation District facility. We just broke ground on the Westmoreland County Community College operation. And there are other projects such as the public water supply that we've helped fund for the Marion Center area in northern Indiana County, and also the investments we've made in Breeze Hose Clamp, now known as Norma Technologies in Salzburg. And those are some examples of how we've been able to progress together, and I look forward to the conversation here for the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tony, let me ask you if you can see that clock okay.
I can see it, Todd.
You're good. Okay, so for the next 2 minutes, your opening statement.
All right. Thank you, Todd. And thank you for Renda Broadcasting for hosting this event. I'm Tony DeLoreto. I've been in Indiana since the early 80s and married a woman from United High School, and we raised a daughter, Monica. And she graduated from Indiana High School and graduated from IUP with a degree in education, and also got her master's as a reading specialist. I am totally dedicated to this community. We've tried to do our best in providing a pleasant atmosphere for people to come visit. And I'm running because I just think there needs to be more coherency in Harrisburg. We have to do something about the career politicians who continue to get nothing done in our state legislature. I've been a part of the board of downtown Indiana. I'm on the board of Chevy Chase, where when I joined the board of Chevy Chase 3 years ago, it was nearly bankrupt, and it's turned around tremendously. I stand up for what I think is right, and if I'm chosen to be the state senator, I will fight like a demon to get everything that there is coming to our district. And I appreciate Senator Pittman's what he's done, and that's part of the job. You get those things done, you provide services, you provide structure, and what we need to do is go a little bit farther. And if I'm elected, I will make sure that I represent the working class families in this area, because I really believe that the working class families have been neglected for a number of years around this area. And I hope to be that person that could do the job, and I will be the person that will do the job and be bipartisan, and will be effective in legislators and holding them accountable, because that's what we need. We got to get lobbyists, and we got to get big corporations out of politics and start worrying about the working class people. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for getting our debate started this morning with your opening statements. I will mention that the debate this morning is brought to you by the Indiana County Republican Party and by the Indiana County Democratic Party. And we're going to go in the order that we started this morning with the random drawing. And so, Senator Pittman, the first question will be yours. You'll have 2 minutes to answer, and Mr. DeLoreto, you'll have a minute to rebut. And if it's necessary for Senator Pittman to rebut, he may do so as well. The Republican-led legislature and the Wolf administration have not agreed on much when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic response. So let's break it into a couple of questions having to do with that. And the first of those is, would you characterize Tom Wolf's business shutdown as having helped or hurt Pennsylvania?
I don't think there's any question that it has hurt Pennsylvania. And I've said many times over that the benefit of hindsight does provide perfect vision. And while we have been uncertain in the beginning on how best to deal with this virus, we've learned much over the last several months. What bothers me most about the governor's approach to this has been his inconsistency and his lack of engagement with the legislature. As I've said before, I don't understand how it's logical that a business like the 700 Shop or Luxembourg's had to be closed down while Walmart and Lowe's were able to remain open as normal. That made no sense. If the objective of the virus and mitigating it was to reduce crowds and reduce capacity, then those big box stores shouldn't have been open, as were the small retailers forced to close. I also think that when you look at some of the messaging that he's portrayed to us, his mixed messages to our school districts in terms of athletics and academics and how they can safely and smartly reopen was not helpful. So I really have been critical of his approach, and I think a lot of it has been his inability to logically communicate the decisions he's made and to engage us as a legislature on perhaps providing some guidance to him on how it could be done better. Part of the problem is he would come out with these edicts and he'd make these rules, and then he'd fade away, while those of us who've been elected to represent our districts were forced to try to explain his positions without the governor himself giving us those tools and ability to do so. And that's what made that entire situation difficult. Emergency declarations were never designed to unilaterally allow a governor to make the decisions he's made for as long as he has.
All right, Senator Pittman. Tony DeLoreto, you'll have 1 minute to rebut. I'm going to assume both of you will want to offer your own thoughts on these questions, so 1 minute for you, sir.
Let me tell you that I think the main concern was the governor was to save lives. Did he do everything right? No, he didn't do everything right. I also didn't understand the logic behind Lowe's and Walmart being open, but nobody has a playbook on this. Nobody knows what to do. And it's, like you said, it's easy to criticize, but really to demonize the governor was out of line. And to ask the legislator to be involved in making decisions, on the spot, legislators can't make decisions in 10 years. They haven't been. Harrisburg is dysfunctional. A simple message. I still don't understand, a simple message of just wearing a mask would prevented a lot of this with what we're having going on now. And I just think the governor did the best that he could do. He had the health of Pennsylvanians at the top of his interest, and that's what he did. You know, he worked for the Pennsylvania people.
Senator, you have a chance to rebut if you choose.
We are not an auxiliary of the governor. We are a co-equal branch. That's the way our Constitution is set up. We, by design, have a government that is supposed to work in a democratic fashion across party lines, across chambers, and that is what we strive to do. We had plans. We put numerous pieces of legislation on his desk with our approach. We wanted to remain consistent with CDC guidelines whenever it came to business closures. We tried to convey to him that closing things such as the real estate market made absolutely no sense. We were the only state in the nation to make such a closure. And so those types of inconsistencies were, to me, just not justified and didn't make sense. And at the same time, we have the situation in our nursing homes, which should have been his primary focus, and it didn't seem to be until it was too late.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. Mr. DeLoreto, the second question will be yours first, and you'll have 2 minutes on this one, and it concerns the pandemic once more. And the question is, what about the governor's medical response? He has taken a lot of heat for ordering infected patients back to their nursing homes. What do you feel about the governor's medical response to the pandemic?
Well, the medical response, as far as the nursing homes go, it goes back to nobody knew what to do in this situation. I mean, he did the best that he could do. You know, he's not worried about getting reelected. You know, his job is to protect Pennsylvania citizens. And you know, as far as the nursing homes, I don't know what he could have done or how he could have done it better, because I'm not there. But like I said, he just did what he had to do. He needed to do what he thought was best to protect Pennsylvania citizens. Was it the right thing to do? I don't know, because there is no playbook. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what the long-term effects are going to be from having COVID. And I'm sure that he could have, if he had a second chance, he would do things differently when it came to that.
Okay, and that's
it.
Okay, very good. Mr. Pittman, your response?
As time has gone on, I have received an increasing number of phone calls from loved ones who are very frustrated with the situation in our nursing homes currently. I think that the longer the lockdowns occur in nursing homes, the more debilitating it is for the families and the residents themselves. Despite his efforts to lock it down, he has still been very negligent in trying to get nursing homes the proper PPE, protective equipment, into their hands so they can safely operate their organizations. I've had several homes who've also expressed concerns over that. One of the pieces of legislation we just passed yesterday that I think is critically important is to require that any first responder be notified during an emergency declaration of a pandemic if the person they're responding to has a communicable disease. One of the things that was happening is our EMS teams were flying blind, and we worked to change that.
Okay, and Mr. DeLoreto, any other response for you?
Just again, real quick. I mean, nobody's been in this situation before. This is a once in 100-year pandemic, and hopefully we don't have it again. I'm sure that officials will know better what to do next time. And like I said, he's not working to get reelected. He's working to save Pennsylvania lives, and he did the best that he could.
Gentlemen, thank you. We've been through 2 questions so far this morning on our candidates debate for the 44th Senatorial District. We want to thank the Indiana County Democratic Party and the Indiana County Republican Party for their sponsorship of this morning's debate, and we want to get to our listener questions as well, because we invited the public to go ahead and send us in their questions. And the first of those that we'll do this morning, Mr. Pittman, it will be your question. In the 1990s, Pennsylvania covered about 75% of the cost of the operations at IUP. Now that figure is down to 25th, and Pennsylvania ranks 46th in the nation in its funding of public schools. Over the past couple of decades, why have Harrisburg politicians failed to properly fund public education in the Commonwealth, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, as it relates to basic education, our per pupil allocation is actually above the statewide national average. And if you look at the schools here in Indiana County, their per pupil allocation is above the state average. There's no doubt that the higher education system is facing significant challenges, and I would very much like to advocate for even more financial support than what we provide them. The state system itself receives about $500 million annually. Just as we went through the COVID crisis, the CARES funding that the federal government provided us, we allocated $30 million specifically to the state system schools. That allocation was driven out by a per pupil basis, which means IUP received the second largest allocation of those 14 schools. We have to recognize that it goes beyond dollars and cents, and that we have to come to terms with our demographics. Our high school enrollments are decreasing. Our young population that is looking to higher education is decreasing, and we have a state system built for a capacity of about 120,000 students that is now only servicing 90,000 students. So there's a wide spectrum of changes that need to be made. They're very painful. If I can advocate for additional funding beyond what we just allocated, not only in the budget we passed in May, but also through the COVID relief, I certainly will. But I hope your listeners remember that unlike our friends at the federal government, we must balance a budget. We do not have the luxury of printing money and running federal deficits. We have to live within our means. And if we don't grow our economy and generate a tax base naturally, then the only other option is to increase taxes on middle-class families, and that is not an approach I'm willing to take. But it does need to be a priority. I've advocated for funding for the university, and I'll continue to do so.
Tony DeLoreto, your response.
Well, the higher education in Pennsylvania has been under attack for the last 20 years. And what they've done now, they had three choices, basically, as far as my view is concerned. You know, you can close some schools, which nobody wants to do because it'll devastate a community. Or the choice they made, they can dilute the education. What we need to do is invest in education. What's happening now is there isn't a proper funding. It's 46 out of 50. This is an education state. We got the best students. We got the best teachers. We should be investing everything we can into education, especially now with the COVID, what's happened. We have the opportunity to start from scratch, to invest in our schools, invest in our communities. And when you invest in a community, you're gonna, when you invest in a school, it's gonna develop the community. And I really think that we need a legislator that will invest in education.
All right, and any final thoughts, Mr. Pittman?
I would just point out many states use proceeds from the lottery funds that they receive to support higher education. Our Commonwealth, when we established the lottery many decades ago, chose to prioritize those dollars for our seniors. And those dollars are used in great ways to support our senior population. That was a policy decision that was made decades ago, and is part of one of the differences why certain states have different levels of funding, particularly for higher education.
Have one quick response to that?
Actually, no, the question went first,
Okay.
but you can revisit it later
All
when
right.
we open the field up, and we can talk about
Okay.
that. We need to move on to our next question, though, and it goes for you, Mr. DeLoreto. And it has to do with the education as well. We'll stay in that forum, but this time move it down to the scholastic level, and it's another listener question. Some people don't think the Commonwealth puts enough money into education, but locally there's a great disparity in school subsidies, with some rural school districts getting much more money than neighboring schools. What could be done to level the playing field for all schools in Indiana County?
Well, a lot of people think that you can go by a per student ratio, which would hurt our community because we're rural. We have to have the investments again in our education, and you can do that a number of ways. You know, you can Marcellus Shell. You can have an extraction tax to get more money involved in our education, and there's a number. You can legalize marijuana and take the tax base from that and invest it in education. You can increase the earned income tax, the graduate income tax, so the wealthy people can pay more money to help for education. The bottom line is you need to invest in education, Todd. I mean, we're not going to get any better as a state by dumbing down our kids. I mean, it has to be a priority. It has to be an initiative on the legislator to say, hey, we need to do this now. Under Corbett, he slashed education, and we're still trying to recover, and we're way behind. Again, it's time to invest in education. It's time to make a proper understanding of what's needed by the educators, what's needed by the brick and mortar schools, and charter schools. Charter schools are devastating to public education. There's a lot of wasted money. They say there's $500 million that they're paid more than they should be, and they have to take a strong look at charter schools and cyber schools and the wasted money that's being spent on, which raises our taxes, property taxes in our communities.
All right, Mr. Pittman, a response from you?
It's factually incorrect that Governor Corbett cut education funding. In fact, it was Governor Rendell who took Obama's stimulus funding in 2009 and supplanted our state revenue with federal money. It was a one-time bait and switch, and that's the facts, and that is the reality. And the school districts knew it. The legislators at the time knew it. It was a one-time allocation out of the economic stimulus. As it relates to per-pupil allocations, we did, until the early 90s, allocate our basic education funding by a per-pupil basis. At that point in time, school districts were held harmless to drops in enrollment. And so often what you see is that the basic education subsidy has been established from the early 90s and built upon. And as student enrollments within school districts change, so does the per pupil allocation. The Basic Education Funding Reform Commission made several revisions to that 2 years ago, and those are actually in effect currently.
All right, Mr. DeLoreto, anything else you would like to add?
I just think that's why Tom Corbett didn't get reelected, because he did attack public education, and he paid the price for it.
Okay, we move on to our next question. We'll remind our listeners this morning that you're listening to the debate for the 41st Pennsylvania Senatorial District, and our conversation with Tony DeLoreto and Joe Pittman is brought to us this morning by the Indiana County Republican Party and the Indiana County Democratic Party. And the next question is fielded first by you, Mr. Pittman. The governor has been at odds over his forcing Pennsylvania to join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Is RGGI a good idea for Indiana County? And what would you do to stop it or to promote it?
It's not a good idea, and I have been focused since he signed his executive order in October to try and stop it. The legislature, in a large bipartisan fashion, put a bill on his desk simply to say that if you're going to implement a multi-state arrangement where you impress upon the people of Pennsylvania a $300 million electricity tax, you should at least get the approval of the legislature. The governor vetoed that bill. He's moving forward on a regulatory perspective to try to implement this tax and to do it unilaterally. And while his administration has acknowledged that Indiana and Armstrong County are the two areas that will be most significantly and negatively impacted, he has yet to come forward and give us any idea of how he's going to replace the economic devastation that will occur if our coal-fired power plants close. You know, we just got done talking about the need to invest in public education. Well, those power plants pay property taxes, and they pay a significant amount of property taxes. For example, in the case of the Homer Center School District, that's a $750,000 annual property tax payment that the power plant pays to that school district. If you want to talk about disinvestment in public education, this is the way to do it. And what's really disturbing is that we are part of a 13-state power grid. And the coal-fired power plants in West Virginia and Ohio, as we speak, are repowering and repurposing. And why are they doing that? Because they're licking their lips in anticipation of our coal-fired power plants closing. You know, our coal-fired power plants have invested nearly $2 billion in emissions controls, and they did that to accommodate the Obama administration's air quality rules. They have invested in the community, they've invested in the environment, and it's a shame that the governor doesn't recognize that.
Mr. DeLoreto.
Well, first off, RGGI would be more detrimental to our area because of the coal mining businesses here, and there has to be concern for those families that are going to lose income. But what's the future? The future is not in coal. It's on decline. It's been on a decline, and I've talked to coal miners that say, hey, the future is not in coal. So we have to be innovators. We have to be leaders. We have to bring economic investment as far as renewable energy. There are 7 states, and those are the money states. That's where we can produce energy for those states, and that'll provide lots of tax revenue to help with all sorts of things like education and infrastructure and building bridges and roads. And it's where the investment needs to be. It's in the future. You need to be innovators. You need to have visionary leaders that know what's at stake. And unfortunately, it's not in coal.
All right, last shot at this question, Mr. Pittman.
There's no doubt that you have to evolve with technology and become more efficient. That's much of what's happened with coal, is that the advent of Marcellus shale gas and fracking has brought natural gas into a predominant position when it comes to generating our electricity. But there are technologies out there. Carbon capture sequestration, that's one of the issues that I've been working with the Boilermakers Union. Sean Steffi, an Indiana County resident here, has been at the forefront of advocating for carbon capture sequestration technologies. In fact, there was just an announcement that a significant investment, probably the largest in the country in the state of New Mexico, in carbon capture technology. Here again, the governor, I've implored him to make use of the federal dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, to advance carbon capture technology. And whenever I inquire with him, what do I get? Crickets. And that's unfortunate. But nevertheless, I will move forward on innovative approaches to try and repurpose those facilities.
All right, and the final chance at this question, Mr. DeLoreto, anything else?
Well, just the power plants, there's nobody knocking down the doors and investing in our coal-fired power plants. They were built in the 60s. They had a 30-year lifespan. They more than doubled their lifespan. And it's time to be leaders and time to put our communities back to work, and we have to look for ways to do that. And I think it's in energy.
Okay, let's move forward then to the next question, Mr. DeLoreto. This one belongs to you, and it remains on the topic of RGGI. If RGGI forces Indiana County's power plants to close, as they have all said would very likely happen, what would you do as senator to help the hundreds of people who would lose their jobs?
As I said earlier, you have to keep those people's concerns close at heart, and we have to figure out a way to supplement their income, whether it be through training, whether it retraining, whether it be by job placement. I have lots of friends that are coal miners, and and past coal miners, retired coal miners. They need to, even when in 1940s when Truman said that coal miners from cradle to grave. That's what he did for the coal miners, and it still continues to this day. I was in D.C. in 2016 fighting against Mitch McConnell for the coal miners to keep their benefits, where they were trying to strip them away, and it has to be taken at heart to make sure these families are taken care of, and it's from cradle to grave. They helped us win World War I and World War II by the energy they produced, and we got to continue to look after them.
Okay, and Mr. Pittman, your response.
Well, whether it's through coal or natural gas, the demand for power will remain. And what we have seen in a lot of areas are that coal-fired facilities have either converted over to natural gas or have converted to a hybrid of coal and natural gas as a mixture. And I think those could be possibilities for these facilities. The men and women that I've talked to that work at these plants and provide maintenance on these plants, they don't want handouts. They want a job. They want to work. And when we had the pandemic and we had stay-at-home orders, they were all at work. They didn't have the opportunity to do their work remotely or virtually. They were on the front lines every day making sure that the rest of us could work remotely and virtually. And so I think we have to be creative and we have to be aggressive and we have to, at the end of the day, work to diversify our economy. That's what we did whenever Urban Outfitters was brought in here. That's what we've done to try to maintain the Breeze Industrial manufacturing facility. And now when we have, for example, Lyotech being purchased, it's another economic opportunity.
And Mr. DeLoreto, you have the final shot at this question. Any other response you'd like to make?
We have to keep the Pennsylvania people in mind. Keep them. We want to create jobs in this area, and we have to be creative, and we have to look, whether it be high tech, whether it's be energy. We just have to look for those dig for opportunities to put people to work.
Okay, our next question, the first response will come from Mr. Pittman, and it has to do with local versus state powers or cooperation. And the question is actually a combination of questions from our listeners. And it is when local issues are brought to the attention of your office, such as the Whites Woods timber dispute or the current effort to purchase the Indiana VFW golf course and put it to use by White Township or by some other entity, what can you as a senator do? How involved can you be?
There's a reason why we're called a commonwealth. And what that means is that power is significantly vested in local government in this state. And I've often said, well, being one of 50 state senators provides you an opportunity to make decisions and make change. Power is significantly vested in local governments. Anytime I have constituents who approach our office, we certainly try to respond. We also try to be respectful of local elected officials. Township supervisors, county commissioners, school board members are independently elected, just as I am as state senator. But nevertheless, there are significant issues that we have to collaborate with local governments. We have to work with constituents to try to make sure that they are given the opportunity to have their concerns heard. And at the end of the day, that is the key, to make sure communities hear their constituents and their residents. It's very difficult whenever you have situations such as Whites Woods and such as the VFW golf course. I'm aware of both issues. I am certainly not a forest management expert. I have observed the conversations in the public. I've met with constituents on the matter, and it seems to me, as I understand it, that that issue in particular has been set aside for at least the time being. But it is very important that as a state senator that we understand the local issues, that we know the local elected officials, and that we work with them in a bipartisan way, regardless of party affiliation, to try and address the mutual concerns of constituents.
Mr. DeLoreto.
Can you repeat the question, Todd, please?
Sure. How involved can you as a senator be in local issues such as the Whites Woods timber dispute or the effort to purchase the VFW golf course, for instance, by White Township? How involved can a senator be in that?
Well, a senator should be involved in communicating with the different elected officials, and he should be a leader in helping make those the choices that will best serve the community. And that's the way to go about it. When it comes to Whites Woods and the golf course, if people need help making decisions, I think that's a state senator's job to lend an ear and say, hey, let's work together with this on this and get something done.
Okay, Mr. Pittman, last chance at this question. Anything else? You're good? All right, let's move on to the next question. Mr. DeLoreto, this one is yours first, and here is the question for you. Just let me press the reset button here since we're just about halfway through our time together this morning. This is the candidates debate for the 41st Senatorial District. Tony DeLoreto for the Democratic Party, and for the Republican Party, Joe Pittman. Our conversation is brought to you this morning by both of those parties, Indiana County branches, Indiana County Democratic Party and the Indiana County Republican Party. Mr. DeLoreto, are Pennsylvania citizens taxed enough to adequately fund the programs the state government considers to be areas of needs? Or in other words, do we need to raise taxes to take care of the state's true necessities?
Well, nobody likes taxes, Todd. I mean, that's as simple as that. But we got to get creative in the way we produce revenue. You have to take a look at different things. I think if Marcellus Shell, they're extracting that gas from underneath the Pennsylvania's homeowners, underneath their feet. I think they're obligated to help subsidize our economy by sharing in the revenue. Another thing that I think is responsible is to look at all the revenue that's created. Where can you produce more revenue? I think the wealthy people should pay a little bit more. It should be their responsibility. It's they made their wealth. Nobody wants to take their wealth away, but an increase in earned income tax is graduated is feasible. The legalization of marijuana, again, I talked about that. There's a lot of tax revenue that could be created by instituting that, and we have to take a look at what institutions could be keyed down, so that doesn't require as much tax money. And we also have to look and see where where the necessities are. What's needed. Where is revenue needed? Nobody likes taxes, but you can't spend money without having money. It's a business. It's a business sense, and we don't print money as a state, but it's up to us as legislators, people who get elected, to make the best use of our dollars. Tax, if you're going to get taxed, make sure you get represented with that tax, and I think that's a fair way to assess it.
Mr. Pittman. The best way to increase tax revenue is to grow the economy, to have more taxpayers. And our state has not been friendly whatsoever to job creators, both from a taxation perspective and also a regulatory perspective. From my vantage point, we need to take advantage of the resources and the assets that we as a Commonwealth have, and the Marcellus Shale is part of that. We just got done talking about our coal plants. Again, because we have been able to extract so much natural gas and bring it into the marketplace, that has actually reduced our dependence on coal, and it's a cleaner and cheaper source of energy. Marcellus Shale does pay taxes. It's called an impact tax. They pay hundreds of millions of dollars every year in an impact tax. Most of that money goes to the municipalities that are impacted by the drilling of natural gas. And it also goes toward important environmental operations such as public water improvements.
All right. And Mr. DeLoreto, your last chance at this question.
Well, I agree that we need to grow the economy and to increase taxation to help fund our Commonwealth. But you can do that through education also. You can invest in education, which will produce jobs and continue our areas like Indiana to grow. So I do agree that economy could be boosted, or tax revenue could be boosted through an increase in our economy.
Okay, very good. Our next question comes for you, Senator Pittman, first, and Mr. DeLoreto then will get the chance to respond. Is Pennsylvania's Constitution strong enough to maintain or to restore the balance between the three branches of government? And if it is not, how would you as senator strengthen it?
It is not, and we've moved forward to aggressively strengthen it. We have passed constitutional amendments. Both chambers of the legislature passed them to limit the governor's ability to single-handedly implement an executive order and an emergency declaration. And that's for any governor, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of the circumstance. Those constitutional amendments were passed by the legislature in this session. The way it works is they will have to be passed again in next session, and then ultimately the voters will see them on their ballot for referendum so they can make the ultimate decision. When the governor was given emergency declaration powers, it was never envisioned to deal with a situation such as this pandemic. It was envisioned to deal with blizzards and hurricanes and floods and other natural disasters that would require immediate but shorter term action. And unfortunately, our state Supreme Court has not read the Constitution the way that we read the Constitution, and therefore we've taken our prerogative to amend it into play and put that before the voters next year.
Okay, the question is on our state constitution. Is it strong enough to maintain or restore the balance between the three branches of government? And if not, how would you as senator strengthen it? Mr. DeLoreto.
Well, I'm not familiar with the Constitution verbatim, but I do know that my opponent's party has held at least 2 out of the 3 branches of the government for at least the last 20 years, and really there's nothing been done. There's no cohesiveness. There's no determination to put working class families in the minds of the legislator, and that needs to be changed. We need to think of a better way for our state to be represented by the officials we elected.
And Mr. Pittman, your final response.
There are times we do agree, and it's usually the times that we agree that you don't hear much about. But whenever this pandemic hit, we, in a very strong bipartisan way, worked with the governor to fund a balanced budget through November 30th. And we did that to try to bring certainty to an uncertain time. And additionally, most importantly, we fully funded both basic and higher education, as well as our pension obligations, our debt service obligations, to make sure that for this entire fiscal year, we would have those obligations funded and provide certainty. We did that in a bipartisan way. We did it cooperatively with the governor, and I appreciate his efforts in helping us do so.
Mr. DeLoreto, last chance at this question. Anything else you would like to add?
Well, as far as the balance being, the budget being balanced for the last 3 years, I don't know if it has, because I don't think the governor signed that balanced budget, and it's that's going to be something that's going to come back and be a big issue real soon.
I think I took that a little bit out of order and gave you a little extra time. I hope you don't mind.
Don't take it away from me, Todd. Don't take it away.
All right. I won't take it away, but I gave you a little extra, so there you go. Let's move on to the next question. Mr. DeLoreto, this is yours first. What will be your top 3 priorities upon taking office on January the 1st?
Well, my top 3 priorities, number 1 will be education. Looking for ways to invest in our education from pre-K through 12th grade, through Pennsylvania higher education. I think it's time that we realize the importance of pre-K in our state, because not everybody has that equal opportunity at the same education. If you have a child starting at pre-K and a child starting at kindergarten, when that child from pre-K goes to kindergarten, you have another one that didn't go to pre-K. That child didn't go to pre-K, feels left behind, and there's consequences to be paid for that. So we have to make the investment in education all across the board, from pre-K to trade school after 2 years of school, whether we're gonna provide educational opportunities for our Pennsylvania high school graduates in our state schools, which seems to be like a no-brainer to me. If you invest in our higher education in Pennsylvania and make it affordable for our children to go to school here, more are going to stay here, and our areas where they host the schools will develop and grow and be an economic stimulant. And also, I'm very concerned about health care as a right in this country. We live in the greatest country on earth, and there's no reason why we should not have health care as a right for everyone. That needs to be put to the forefront, and that's some of the challenge we must face. And also, the third thing would be looking at renewable energies. How can we be leaders? How can Pennsylvania be leaders in this technology and create jobs for people to move here from suburbs? And I think that's the best way to do it. Those are my top 3 issues there.
All right. Mr. Pittman, your top 3 priorities.
Overarching all of it is the economy. We must do everything we can to provide economic opportunities. Economic opportunities solve a lot of problems. But within that, broadband deployment, broadband technology, it's something that I've worked very aggressively with the Indiana County Commissioners on. The pandemic has highlighted the need to have that access in rural communities. I will continue to push back and help mitigate the economic devastation that the governor will impress upon us through his RGGI implementation. That must be an immediate priority. And then the other priority that we have as elected officials is constituent service and constituent response. That is very critical. It's something that my office takes great pride in. I took great pride in during my time as Senator White's chief of staff, and that is an extremely critical part to being a state senator.
Mr. DeLoreto, anything else on that topic, your top 3 priorities?
No, the economy is, with the investment in education, with the investment in renewable energy, with the investment in broadband, that will stimulate the economy.
All right, our next question for Senator Pittman. You're listening to the 41st senatorial debate between Joe Pittman and Tony DeLoreto, brought to you by the Indiana County Democratic Party and the Indiana County Republican Party. Mr. Pittman, the question is, are property taxes a part of your agenda, and do they need reduced, eliminated, kept the same, or raised?
They certainly are part of my agenda, and I fundamentally believe that if we are going to make that reform, which has been decades in the discussion, it must be eliminated. We cannot simply reduce it, because invariably what happens is when you reduce it and you increase another tax, that property tax will go back up. And so it must be eliminated. I fundamentally believe that it is a subjective, arbitrary, and unfair tax. I believe that a person's home is their castle. One of the items that we tackled a few years ago was to ask the voters to change our state constitution to allow us to explore specifically the elimination of the property tax on the primary resident. Not all commercial properties, but the primary residency. And that is something prior to the pandemic that we were on the verge of tackling. Obviously, part of the problem is that if you're going to eliminate a tax, such as the school property tax statewide, that is a $14 billion shift of taxation. And when you do that, you get into some very difficult numbers when it comes to sales tax and income tax. Secondly, with it relating to primary residencies, that impact would be about $6 billion. So we're talking about a much more manageable shift in the overall form of taxation. The other area that I think we need to seriously explore, and it's not a novelty in other states, is that voters are empowered in other states to approve $1 any proposed tax increase by a school district. And that can work. It's worked in Ohio. In New York, the voters ultimately approve every school district budget. And if we're not going to make that fundamental change, then I think we need to at least empower the local electorate to make that decision so they can control their own destiny when it comes to property taxation.
Mr. DeLoreto, the question on property taxes.
Well, I think it's good to look at other states and see what's working better. And when I ran in 2016, I ran on the same premise not then as I am now. I'm an advocate for the elimination of property tax for primary residents and working farms, and primary residents being $300,000 houses and less. And the way you can make up that difference is it's very simple as far as I can see. You can increase the sales tax, include everything that is except for WIC. Marcellus Shell, again, we're getting back to Marcellus Shell, increase in the earned income tax for people that are making, for wealthy people, have a graduated income tax, so they pay a little bit more. That's their responsibility. That should be their patriotic responsibility. And again, legalizing the marijuana and reaping the benefits that the taxpayers will get from it. And I think it's easy. Eliminate the property tax for our primary residents and have an increase across the board that everybody has a shared sacrifice.
Mr. Pittman, anything else on that question?
If you're going to do anything to eliminate the property tax, the numbers have to work. And what we just heard are solutions that won't work. You can't legalize marijuana and think you're going to generate $14 billion of tax revenue. We already have a tax on the Marcellus Shell producers. And guess what? If they don't produce, they don't get taxed. And here we are in a state we're trying to drive them out of our Commonwealth as well through RGGI, because RGGI will not only just tax coal plants, but it'll tax gas plants. So we're in a situation where we've either got to accept the economic opportunities we have and embrace them and grow our tax base, or we've got to realize that if we're going to shut our economy down, we're going to be resorting to things like legalizing marijuana for tax revenue, which I really do not think is productive.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to move into the final portions of our conversation this morning. A couple of questions possible here. Mr. DeLoreto, we're going to throw this one at you first. This is a question from a listener. I've heard for years every candidate wants to bring jobs to the area, industry, but the truth is most companies don't even look at Pennsylvania. And it's states like North Carolina, Texas, and other southern states that continue to explode with development. Why is this, and what do you plan to do as a leader in the Senate to make Pennsylvania more business-friendly?
Well, to make Pennsylvania more business-friendly, we have to communicate with the prospective employers, and we have to work something out with them, whether it be tax incentives, which you don't like to see normally for to entice employers to come to town. But you just have to, as a state senator, you have to get out there. You have to be mobile. You have to be willing to do the dirty work, make the phone calls, and sell Pennsylvania. It's as simple as that. Sell Pennsylvania. And I think Pennsylvania has the best workers in the country. They have the best educators in the country, the best students in the country. And that's what it's all about. It's about selling Pennsylvania and the opportunities that are here. And there could be many opportunities depending what direction we go. If we're looking toward the future and not dwelling on the past, looking toward the future, we can get businesses and manufacturers that come to Pennsylvania if we sell sell Pennsylvania. That's what a state senator's job should be, sell Pennsylvania.
Mr. Pittman, again, the question, how do we make Pennsylvania more business friendly?
We are at a competitive disadvantage. There's no question about it. As I said, we have the highest corporate net income tax in the nation. We have a regulatory environment that is very fragmented and difficult to navigate. We have a legal environment that is very much interested in making money from trial lawyers. Lawsuit abuse reform, I think, needs to be an important part of it. But we have to make our state competitive compared to the other 49 states, and we're not there. And we need to work together to make it more competitive. I would point out, for example, whenever the Urban Outfitters deal was done and it was recruited here, it was a very difficult process, and a big part of that was because they were looking at other states and they had much more attractive opportunities in a lot of ways in other states. But it was particularly the leadership of Representative Reed and Senator White who were able to convince them that this was the right place to locate, and we're fortunate they did.
Mr. DeLoreto, anything else on making Pennsylvania more business friendly?
Well, I definitely agree there should be tort reform in this state, in the country for that matter. And I really don't think that the job to getting the Urban Outfitters to come here is fantastic, but I really don't think that Urban Outfitters has lived up to their expectations yet. Hopefully that we'll see what happens in the future.
Gentlemen, we're moving on here in our debate. We're getting toward the end, and we're going to give you a chance here to address any other topic that has been discussed that you would like to follow up on. And I will give you each 2 minutes with that specific question, and then we'll move on very shortly to our final statements. Whose question is it first? It is yours first, Mr. Pittman, is it not? Yeah, I believe it is. I believe it is. Is there something that has been discussed here that you would like to follow up on? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I think we could certainly spend the length of this debate talking about our need to work together as a community to grow our economy. That is the single overriding issue that we have to deal with. A lot of that comes along to advancing and enhancing our infrastructure. As we talked about broadband infrastructure technology and the $2 million investment that we made there, I think that is very, very important. It's a small step, but an important step, and it's going to require a significant amount of dollars to continue that process. But broadband development isn't just about money. Just yesterday, we passed 2 very important pieces of legislation that we sent to the governor, and we did so in a bipartisan way. One was a bill that I authored to allow rural electric associations to use their existing infrastructure and their existing easements to deploy broadband to their customers. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's not a be-all, end-all, but what it will do is it will save them time and it will save them money by being able to do that more quickly. We also did a complete rewrite of the telecommunication laws. Some of them were as old as 1952. They were very archaic, very irrelevant, and they were very cumbersome. And we worked with the Public Utility Commission to make several significant reforms there that will allow and foster technology development in that regard. The other issue as it relates to broadband is the make-ready permitting process that we established within the PUC, again, to save time and money. So I think that needs to be a new focus beyond the focus that we've had on our more traditional infrastructure such as water and sewer, and I've been very pleased to be working on that infrastructure as well as a member of the Penvest board to help get grants and loans to our communities for those services.
All right, Mr. DeLoreto, we're talking about any question or issue that has been brought up here today that you would like to follow up on. We'll have 2 minutes.
One is the broadband issue. Yeah, it's a necessity to grow rural Pennsylvania. It should be treated as a public utility. That's the one thing. And as far as stimulating the economy, I think the economy can be stimulated through investments in education. Give our students the opportunity, the Pennsylvania high school graduates, to go to our state schools at a reduced fee, and so it would be more attractive, and that way they'll come here, and as things get vibrant in the communities, other out-of-state students, out-of-country students will look at IUP and other state schools to be a kind of school they want to go to. And as far as what my opponent said about the numbers not being there, I didn't just say legalization of marijuana in Marcellus Shell. I also said an increase in sales tax, and including everything but WIC, and also through the increase in earned income tax, because that will be more than enough to pay for a lot of things that need to be done in the state. And another thing we have to look at is diluting our education. You can't have that. That's the path they have chosen by combining universities and eliminating professors, and nobody wants. You're not going to be more attractive as a university when you look at universities eliminating faculty positions, so the student to ratio, student to professor ratio is larger. That's not more attractive, and I think that's some of the things we need to be concerned about, and we have to look to the future. And I think the future is going to be renewable energy, and that we have to be leaders and innovators so we can build. Pennsylvania can boom with that kind of economy, with that kind of investment, and all those things I just suggested.
All right, gentlemen, we're at the end of our time together, almost. There is time for your final statements. Each of you will get 2 minutes, and again, by random drawing, Mr. Pittman, you will have the first of our final statements this morning.
Todd, thank you, and thank you again to your entire team here at Renda. Mr. DeLoreto, thank you for being here. I appreciate the discussion, and again, appreciate your willingness to step forward as a candidate. I'm committed to these communities. In the 16 months that I have been your state senator, I've been honored to be your voice in Harrisburg. This is a difficult time for our area, but I view my role as being a representative for our entire community. I'm very proud of the fact that I have received the endorsement from several members of the organized labor unions, the private sector trade unions primarily, who recognize the value of family-sustaining jobs that come from our energy industry. The carpenters union, the electrical workers union, the boiler makers, the mine workers, the laborers have all endorsed my campaign because they know that I'm fighting every single day in Harrisburg to be their voice and to ensure that their family-sustaining job is there for them every day. I do believe that experience matters, and I appreciate and recognize the experience that my opponent has in operating his business, and that experience has lent him to be able to operate it so well. In my experience as Senator White's Chief of Staff and in the last 16 months as your state senator provides me the ability and the understanding of navigating the halls of Harrisburg while keeping my pulse on the concerns of the constituents and being a voice for this area in western Pennsylvania. So I respectfully ask the voters for their support on November 3rd. I respectfully ask them to reaffirm the support they gave me in May of 2019 to be their senator. And if I am honored to serve you for the next 4 years, I assure you I will earn your support going forward. Thank you.
Mr. DeLoreto, your final statement today.
Well, thank you for having us here today, Todd, and I appreciate Senator Pittman's recognition of what I've done in the community with the restaurant and in my experience. But I think experience is valued as a working man. I don't believe that experience in Harrisburg, as corrupt as Harrisburg is, in 2016 they had Harrisburg as the second most corrupt government in the state, in the country. There has to be leadership that will take responsibility for what others do in the Harrisburg office. My opponent's campaign has been funded through the lobbyists and the big corporations. I too am endorsed by unions such as AFL-CIO and ASME and others. But my primary reason for wanting to be elected to this position is to represent the working class people, because for far too long they have not been represented in this community. And my opponent, I have nothing against him personally, but to be groomed for this position and to be slid in, on the down low is not the kind of government officials we need in Harrisburg. Like I said, it's corrupt. It's time to clean it up, and it's time to hold legislators responsible for their activities. And that's why on November 3rd, I humbly ask for your vote to be your next state senator to move our state forward and our district forward to be a better community. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much both for being with us here this morning. We appreciate it very much. Our debate has been brought to you by the Indiana County Republican Party and by the Indiana County Democratic Party. Election Day is coming up on November 3rd. The 41st Senatorial District will certainly be a part of that election. We urge you to vote, having considered the statements made here today by our candidates. And we remind you that next Wednesday, Pennsylvania House 62nd District will be the subject of conversation with the candidates Denny Semcik and Jim Struzzi. And thank you for joining us here. The Brian Kilmeade Show is next after Fox News.
Hi, I'm Denny Semcik, candidate for the House of Representatives.
And I'm Tony DeLoreto, candidate for state senator.
We encourage everyone to make their voices heard through their vote.
We favor investments in education and limiting the taxpayers' burden from the inequities of charter and cyber schools. I'm Tony DeLoreto.
I'm Denny Semcik.
And we both
ask for your vote on November 3rd.
The Indiana County Republican Committee is proud to be a presenting sponsor of today's debate, and we thank Renda Broadcasting for hosting it, as we have always supported getting factual information out to our community. Our committee would like to thank each of you for listening in, as it is very important for votes to be made with knowledge and confidence. Let's work together and keep Indiana, Pennsylvania, and America great by voting all Republican on November 3rd.